Hello, how are you doing? Welcome back to the channel. It is here, people, the start of the new Gallagher Premiership season. Bristol hosting Bath on Friday night at Ashton Gate. So in this video, I'm going to be looking ahead to that match in particular. Bit of a Bristol focus. Pat Lam has just finished his pre-match press conference. So I'll be going through some of what he said and some points that I thought were quite interesting. Remember, if you're new here, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment down below who you think is going to win on Friday night. It would be a massive help. So first off, in terms of what Pat went through, a little bit of team news for you. Pat Lam doesn't often give too much away, particularly as the season goes on. It's very much you kind of have to wait and see until a day before kickoff of who he names in his squad. But a few injuries to update you on. No Stephen Luatua. He's got a slight calf injury from the way Pat was speaking about it. Didn't seem too serious, but it did give the impression that he wouldn't be playing on Friday night, which is a big blow for Bristol. No Siva Lango either. He's had surgery, so probably a couple of months before we see him return on the wing. And no Semi Randrandra either. Again, doesn't sound too serious. In fact, both Luatua and Randrandra were at the Premiership launch last week on Thursday for Bristol. So they were in their kit. They were doing various media duties. But as things stand at the moment, it looks like those guys aren't going to be part of the squad to take on Bath. And in particular, the Luatua injury could be, wouldn't say serious, but that's probably more of a concern at this stage for the Bears, because Fitzharding is still going through return to play protocols. I don't think he's going to be involved. And Dan Thomas as well, he picked up an injury in pre-season, which is touch and go. They're monitoring. He might be involved against Bath, but they're not sure at this stage. So when you look at Luatua and Fitzharding, I mean, Luatua is arguably the best player at the club, certainly the best back row player. Fitzharding, I think, was probably the best player last year for the club. Definitely the breakout star, the guy that came through with a lot of credit in the bank in what was a tough season. You're missing them. You might be missing Dan Thomas already in that back row for Bristol. Maybe looking a little bit light. I think it probably means we'll see a debut for Magnus Bradbury. He joined the club this summer. Exciting prospect, a guy whose career perhaps hasn't had the upwards trajectory that they first thought it would in Scotland when he broke through. So I think we could see him start. Jake Heenan is still there. He's been more of a squad player over the last few years for the Bears. He played against Scarlets in the pre-season friendly, the most recent one. So I just wonder whether we're going to see maybe Bradbury, Heenan, possibly someone like Chris Vui slot in at 6 in that back row. But I think back row for Bristol with those injuries, that's going to be quite an interesting area to look at, shall we say, when the teams are announced on Thursday. Outside of that, Pat was asked about the aim for the season. Now, this was interesting, I think, because in previous years, Pat Lam has been fairly open on giving a place in the table that they're aiming for. When they first came up, it was top 6. They just missed out on that. Then it was top 6 the next season, then top 4, then finishing top of the table. They were quite public in what they wanted to achieve and where they wanted to finish in the table. Now, on the back of last season, when asked about what's the aim for the season, what does success look like for Bristol, Pat essentially said that it was about consistency and about being a full team effort. And he didn't come out straight away with, we want to finish 4th, we want to finish 1st, we want to be in the top 6 or anything like this. Now, he did get on to finishing in the top 4 and trying to finish in the top 4, which I think is ultimately the aim for the club, as it is for most clubs. But I thought it was quite interesting that he didn't nail his colours to the mast in the same way that he has perhaps in previous seasons. So maybe that's a slightly different tact coming off the back of a really disappointing campaign, let's be honest, that he was focusing on things and approaching things in a slightly different way rather than putting a end season, this is where we want to finish, very measurable goal on it. We'll wait and see. We'll see how they get on. But I thought that was quite interesting. Third point I wanted to make was on Ellis Genge. He is probably the big name signing for Bristol this summer. Returning home, a Bristol boy who left the club fairly soon after breaking into the team when he was a bit of a youngster. He's documented how that was the best move for him at the time. He was getting into a bit of trouble in Bristol. He went to Leicester. He's established himself in the England team, captained Leicester to the Premiership title. So he's returning as a superstar of the game, really. Certainly a superstar of English rugby. So Ellis Genge is coming back. And I think he will play. There was a question asked in the press conference about the return to play protocols for the England players, because those that were in Australia, some of them have only returned to training for the last few weeks, and Ellis Genge is one of them. And there's often a bit of confusion about when players can come back, how many weeks rest they have to have, etc. And Pat Lam went into a bit of that, which was quite interesting. And he essentially said that there's a game management board which is made up of a number of different people. I think Premiership Rugby, the RPA, the Players Association, possibly the RFU as well. And for each player and each club, it's different. So Ellis Genge came back into the Bristol setup. First game of the Premiership season at home against Bath. Being a Bristol boy, he wanted to be involved in that, regardless of only playing for England however many weeks ago it was. So that's allowed. And what Bristol then did, they took that to Eddie Jones, probably with the plan of how they would rest Ellis Genge for the rest of the season, including around the Six Nations in the autumn and that sort of thing. Eddie was happy with that, and then they take it to that game management board and for them to sign off on it. So if you see some England players playing in the first few weeks of the season and others not, that's why. They're all going to have different return to plays, which they agree with their clubs, with England, with the Premiership and the RPA and everyone else to make sure that they get the right amount of rest, which actually is quite a good approach to it. I didn't realise it was quite so fluid, but I think that's a positive thing. And it also means, I think, I'll be amazed if Ellis Genge doesn't play against Bath, and I think he'll probably start. Pat Lam said something else in the press conference as well when asked about Ellis Genge, about this being his people, this being his community. This is a homecoming for Ellis Genge. And even though he's coming off winning a Premiership title with Leicester, joining a Bristol side that are in a very different part of their transition, I think he's going to have a galvanising effect on the team emotionally. He's a sort of player that I think can turn games in your favour. He's playing for the club he loves, back in the city that he's from, and as he said, it's his people. So Ellis Genge to start, Ellis Genge to have a big impact this season for Bristol. And the final thing to touch on was pre-season. Very difficult to know how much you can tell from results and things in pre-season, but Pat Lam did speak about it. He spoke about how they got on. He said they'd have had 3 quite tough games, and they fought back against Scarlets. Some of you may well have watched that Scarlets game. There was a stream that you could essentially pay for. It was about £2 that you could pay for. It was the Scarlets coverage of the stream, and Bristol were down in that game at half-time. They then came back into it to win, so I think Pat Lam was quite pleased to see that sort of character from his side. And also importantly, he also said that he was pleased with how the players made decisions and turned the game around, how they problem solved in that match, which was something last season that Bristol probably didn't do, really. It was pretty dreadful. They didn't problem solve in the way that they would most want to. So he was really pleased with that. And also their scrum. Their scrum looked quite strong. Mark Irish has come back. He was at Worcester. Previously at Bristol, went to Worcester, and now he's come back to Bristol again to be in charge of that set piece for the Bears. Had a really good impact when he was at Bristol last time out. He's come back in and again seems to be having a positive impact. So maybe the Bristol scrum this season as well is going to be something to keep an eye on, and also something, an area of strength for the Bears. I haven't really spoken too much about the game on Friday night, have I? We'll see what Bath say in their press conference, and also maybe just wait until the team news comes out, which is on Thursday. So I'll try and do a video on Thursday to look at both sides and do more of a preview and a predictions there. Bath, of course, with Johann van Graan coming in from Munster. Quite a lot of uncertainty around what they're going to look like after coming bottom of the table last year. So I think it's a really interesting fixture. I'm not too sure if either of these sides are going to be up there in the top 4 come the end of the season. If you watch my prediction video, which you can get on the channel, I didn't have either of them in the top 4. For Bath, that's probably not controversial. Bristol, I think people might expect them to be a bit up there, but I'm not sure they'll be top 4. But on Thursday, I'll do another video where I'll get into that Bath-Bristol game, look at the teams, and we'll take it from there. Remember, put in the comments down below how you see it going on Friday night. Anything interesting, particularly about Bristol, you see this season that I maybe haven't covered in this video. I just chose a selection of things that, after being on that press conference, kind of stood out to me and I thought was quite interesting. So let me know down below. And also, don't forget, subscribe to the channel, like the videos. See you in the next one.